Hello everyone who has joined us in this webinar today. Welcome you all to this webinar session. Event-driven integrations have become inevitable to meet the real-time demands of our end users now. Today, I have got Michael Stephenson, coach and who is training and assisting organizations adapt to cloud smooth for more than a decade now. And today he's going to show us how to define a friction-free support strategy for enterprise integrations in built-in Azure. Over to you, Mike. We are happy to have you in our webinar session today.
Thank you, Ezel. Morning, everybody. I hope everybody's keeping well. So today we're going to have a little bit of a talk about how to use serverless 360 to help you support messaging and event solutions. If anybody saw the session earlier in, I think it was mid-October, I think, where we had Dan Toomey talked about how to build and how to use event technologies like Event Grid, Event Hub and stuff like that. And what we wanted to do is we know that a lot of customers really focus on using those techs and do some great solutions with them. And we wanted to talk a little bit about how serverless 360 can help you support the solutions that we build with those technologies. We think, the Azure portal has good features, but there's some significant gaps that creates challenges for customers in how to support the solution that gets built. So we want to talk a little bit about how serverless 360 helps. We're going to talk about, basically I've got 4 demos I want to go through where we'll look at an example business use case that gets implemented with one of the technologies we'll talk about. And then we'll go and have a look at how that demo gets configured in serverless 360 to help you actually support the solution. So quick agenda so everybody knows what we're going to cover. So I'm just going to define the problem first. We're then going to have a look at Event Hub, Event Grid, Domain, and then Service Bus. And the Service Bus demo actually combines Event Grid and Service Bus together. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the implementation details, but what we're going to focus on is how serverless 360 can help you. So I know a lot of people probably saw Dan's session a few weeks ago, but just a really quick recap. So if you're building solutions in the event and messaging space, you typically have these 3 concepts. You've got the messaging and event platform, which is the bit that Azure gives you. So we've got Event Grid, Event Hub, and Service Bus. And then you have the idea of a publisher who'll send an event or a message to the technology. And there's a lot of different things that you can use, whether it be an Azure service. You get some of them will have out of the box events get published by various products on Azure and stuff. You can send your own messages and events as well, and you can do it from code, from things like logic apps, functions, and various other things. And then we have something will consume the event or message. So in this case, just to call out a few specific examples, typical customers use things like logic apps, functions, synapse. If you're doing any data platform stuff, you quite often would be using Synapse or Data Factory to ingest messages. And you can do a lot of other things as well, so people can write their own code. There's other technologies available, but they're the 4 common ones we see on Azure. And if we take a look for a moment at the different kinds of services here, so I've got the link if anyone wants to go and read more detail about this. I've kind of pinched this table from part of the Microsoft documentation to just give us that summary. So Event Grid is really about reactive programming. Something changes, an event gets published to an Event Grid, and then you can subscribe to a notification. You get sent the event to your service, and then you do something with it. Event Hub is slightly different. So Event Hub is really like a stream of events. And the big thing with Event Hub that's different is it's basically like a log of events that you would read across. So if you imagine, I have a publisher who keeps sending 10 messages a second. They build up in this big stream and they live on that log for a period of time. And I have a pointer to a position in the log with my consumer, and I'll just read messages as they get added to the log. And then I've got the option to go back to an earlier point in time and reread. And Event Hub's quite a common pattern for things like telemetry data or streaming of messages. The third one, which has been around the longest on the Azure platform, Service Bus. So this is really about publish, subscribe messaging. It's about high value messages where you want some kind of transactional process, and it tends to be used for things like order processing, finance transactions, stuff like that. And really, I guess the key thing is that we've got three main different offerings from Azure. There are slight overlaps between some of them in places, but they tend to have a discrete focus for the majority of what they do. But what you can do as well is you can combine them together, and there are cases where you might want to use Event Grid plus Service Bus or something like that, and you can, you know, kind of join them together to build your solution. So challenges. So we see a lot of challenges that customers have. So common things that I come across are, you know, you get a customer who might have hundreds of topics and queues and subscriptions in the various technologies, and the questions: how do I know out of my namespace, if it's a service bus, for example, how do I know which queues are used where? How do I manage them on like a solution scope rather than just having a massive namespace with loads of queues in? And then you might have things where a customer might have resources that are spread across multiple subscriptions or resource groups. And the challenge is, how do you jump between them to know what things work together when you get a problem, and have that kind of operator view of what's, you know, kind of what your solution does. The other problems sometimes we have support operators in different teams. You only want to have manage certain resources. So for example, let's say we've got two applications and they have distinct support teams, but they have shared resources. You do have a lot of capability with RBAC in Azure, so you can do, you know, quite fine-grained security, but that configuration can get really complicated and be difficult to maintain. So it's difficult when the resources are spread out. And then there's things like, you know, if you think about that whole publisher platform and then subscriber kind of concept, you know, it's like, how do I know my app's working well? So really, what I think to recognize is that very often a messaging or an event solution isn't just the queue, isn't just the event grid, isn't just the event hub. It's also probably the things that consume the message, and potentially also the things that publish the message, that are your, you know, in quotes, your app. And you want to know, is it all working effectively for the business problem that we're trying to solve? And that, I think, is the thing people struggle with the most. So if I take a step back for a minute and we think about the value proposition for Serverless 360, so these are a couple of slides that I had in my last webinar a month or so ago. And I think these are really kind of foundation principles to what we try to do with Serverless 360. So if we think of the typical support model that many customers have, is you have this idea that you've got business users who have a solution that they need support for. They may have a problem. They may just want to know, is it working well? If there is an issue, often that gets escalated to level 1 support, level 2 support, level 3 support. And then really what we tend to find is it's not until you get the very experienced people that they actually have access to this solution in the Azure portal, and they're able to do anything with it. And what we tend to find is that very little support gets done early in the support life cycle by the level 1, 2 support engineers, and even sometimes the level 3 support. And a lot of it tends to go back to the developers, and it's really hard, you know, to find this balance about you write the code, but you also run it. But actually, if there's really like lightweight support issues, it's not an effective use of the developer's time to be troubleshooting fairly low value support issues. The idea really that we look to aim for is if we can move stuff to the left and have more support done earlier in this process, that's really where the value for serverless comes in, and the customer starts seeing big benefits. So really, these are the kind of problem areas, is that it's really about limited visibility, limited access, and when you do get access, it's so complicated in Azure that you can't really work out what to do. So a quick summary of our principles here: it's really about lowering the cost of ownership, democratizing that support experience so that your most experienced people can focus on delivering new value, and you can let the support team be able to support the solution without having to be an Azure expert. So where serverless fits in then is we've got these two main modules that help from a support operator perspective. We've got business activity monitoring. We're not going to talk about that a lot today, but the last demo does touch on it. And then we've also got business applications, and business applications is the one in the middle here. And that's the bit where we let the support team start seeing what's happening in your solution, but in a safe and effective and easy to use way. And business activity monitoring is really about the business transactions and managing those as opposed to the technical solution. Okay, so what we're going to do, as I say, is we're going to go through 4 different scenarios and then have a look at how it's implemented and how serverless helps. I think we're going to go at quite a reasonable pace, I think, because we've only got about 50 minutes to talk today. So first off, we're going to talk about an event hub, and here's a real world type scenario that I've seen implemented with an event hub. So we've got trains out in the world delivering stuff, moving products around, and it's a transport type solution. We have telemetry from our trains. So for example, every time a train moves or every hour, it may send us a message just to say what it is, what it's doing, if it's got any issues. And that data may come into your platform and hit something like an event hub. And from the event hub, it's then a case of what are you going to do with it? So one example that you might see is, let's say we've got an Azure function that listens to the event hub. As messages hit the event hub, it reads them, and maybe we're going to save them into a Cosmos DB. And once it's in Cosmos DB, that opens up a few opportunities. So one example might be you build a customer portal, and if I've got a rail car that has product for a customer on, I could maybe link from that product to the rail car and tell the customer where that product is on route to be delivered to them. The other option is, if anyone follows my blog, you'll see that I've talked a lot about Azure Synapse recently. And if you're a data scientist, you can use Synapse Link for Cosmos DB, and you could maybe start writing deep analysis of using, pointing direct at Cosmos and start querying some of that data you're getting. Now, in our demo, obviously, I have limited access to be able to move rail cars. And as much as I would like to do that, and it sounds a lot of fun, and maybe I need to get a train set with some GPS stuff on maybe, but what we're going to do is simulate messages coming in with an event, with a logic app that'll send some test messages, simulating the same as what the train does. So what I'll do, excuse me, I'm going to jump over to my Azure portal first and just show what this demo looks like. So here we've got in the Azure portal, it's quite a simple demo. We've got our event hub. Most people are probably fairly familiar with an event hub, and then inside my namespace, I can have multiple hubs here, and I've got my demo events. And to be honest, there's not really a lot to look at on an event hub. It's really just a stream of events coming in, and the logic app that goes with this, if we jump back a second, really simple. And it, you can see here that this actually runs every hour. It sends a little burst of messages, and I just use this action to push it to the event hub, and I send a bit of data to it. And if we go back to over here, we've got a function, and some of the great things in the Azure stack is that things like Logic App have connectors for event hubs, and things like function apps. You'll be able to see here, I've just written an inline function, and you'll be able to see that it's quite easy to actually listen to the event hub. And you can see here, I've just got a message that I receive, and I'd go through the array of events from the event hub, and I'd basically what I'm doing here is I'm using there's an output binding. So up here, this async collector, up here basically lets me build a document down here, and these documents just get added to Cosmos. So there's very little code I have to write for this solution. I'm using a lot of the bindings and that kind of thing. The challenge though is, if I sort of think of this from a support, excuse me, I've jumped far too quickly there. Give me a second. So it's my event hub one here. So challenge as a support person, I've got this solution in here in the Azure portal, but I need to know a lot about Azure to be able to work out what's going on. How do I manage it? How do I kind of troubleshoot and stuff? And actually deliberately with this one, my Cosmos is in another subscription, in another resource group. So it's a bit more complicated to sort of see how to manage it. Now, over in serverless 360. So what we're going to do to begin with, I'm going to start by creating a brand new app here, just to go through that experience of setting one up. So here, I would create a business application. I'm going to create my point to my service principal here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by looking at so I've got my event hub here, resource group, which has got most of the stuff in. And I can pick my function app. The filters still apply that I've put in place already, so I can pick my function. And if I go down here, I can pick my event hub as well. And I can basically just add some resources to this new app. I get the option to click a monitoring profile, so I'm going to take my default system profile as well. And then I can say, what do you want to do with it? So in this case, I'm going to get some email receipts, and there's some default configuration about status reports and what channels do you want to use to get your notifications and stuff. But I'm going to take everything straight out of the box here and set this new app up. So we'll just let that create the app, and we'll see up here I've got Mike's new app, and you can see that's showing up as green. So the first thing that it did is, because I've taken the default profile, it applies all of the pre-configured monitoring alerts and stuff set up. So straight away I'm getting monitoring from day one, from the minute I've created my my app. You can see inside my app here, I can go in and I can see easily these are the resources that I've chosen to be in this app, and I can see their monitoring status here. I can go in, maybe if I want to go in, let's say we go into the event hub, and you can see here I've got some graphs configured out the box for the event hub. If I go to the monitoring, you can see there's already some pre-configured monitoring metrics set up. So I'm looking for certain thresholds on counters, and I can go and start modifying this if I want to. That's easy to do. But it's all this, the first thing is your time to get some active monitoring going is really good. Now, one thing to just note, if I take a step back for a second, if you notice, this one's just flagged up red here. And what I did is there's actually data going through all these demos at the minute. So occasionally some of these might hit an error condition, because I've got some pre-built errors in some of it. Just if you see that flag up, that actually shows me that there's an error there. And inside this app, I can go and have a look and see, here I can see that there's something, I think my Cosmos DB probably broke its threshold of how much data I'm pushing at it, which we'll look at in a minute. But let's go back to the new app I've created. So straight away up here, I've got this service map feature, and you can see I've got a pre-generated diagram with my resources in. The green box around it shows me that it's picking up the monitoring status, and I can see how, these are in a good state. And if I want, I can go and, edit the diagram and start, drawing new lines between stuff. Let me get the must have not quite done that right. I'll just take a step back for time for a minute there. So you can start moving the diagram around and stuff. I'll show you one that I've modified myself in a minute. And really that's kind of like the out of the box setup. You've got your resources, you've got your service map, you've got a bunch of features like dashboards we'll look at in a minute, but that gets you up and running really quickly. Now, what I did for this event hub demo is I've actually already pre-configured a business app here, and I've actually got the Cosmos DB in as well. I've got the sender logic app. So if we take a look here, you can see the sender, and I've got some I've got some nice visuals of how the logic app's performing here. And if we go and have a look at that event hub for a minute now. So here I've got the dashboard of key metrics about how the event hub's running, if I want to just troubleshoot or see what's going on it. And I can actually modify the time settings. Things like Cosmos, for example, here I might go and, if I want to go and query this Cosmos, I might just write a query here, and I can go and execute it if I wanted to, and it'll go and get some data, and I can see what's in my Cosmos if I want to be able to do that. And it's really about pulling these resources together that work together, that solve the problem that I'm implementing here. So I know we had the Cosmos flagged up in error, and I think if we go back over to the resources here and we click the error link, and we can see that it's flagging an error because the total request units is bigger than the threshold. So that's really going to be off one of the monitoring alerts that we've configured. And you can see over here, I've got a total requests unit limit, and that flagged up. And really what's happened there is I've had a little burst of messages that push the DTUs for the Cosmos DB beyond the threshold I've set, and it triggers an alert. Now, in addition to the event hub, which we've just had a quick look at, things like the functions are quite important for this solution. So, here I've got my event hub listener, and I can do things like see the invocation logs if I want to troubleshoot any issues. I can test it. I think going back on the function, we've got a couple of other tasks where if I wanted, if I'm a support operator and want to stop messages, I can update the status here and disable the event hub. I can also do like a manual send of a message here. So if I wanted to send a message and see, kind of is my app working, I can put some JSON in here maybe, and I can just go run the task, and that'll go and trigger a message onto the event hub, and it'll go and process some stuff. Now, one of the things that we might do, if we go back to the root app here, is let's say we've got the problem of, we get bursts of messages every now and again off rail cars. What about if I want to send that test message, but on a regular basis to see how it's going? So what I can do here is I can set some automated tasks. So I can go in, and here I can say, right, I want to have an event hub automated task to send some events to the event hub. And I could basically step through a little wizard here. I can choose the event hub, and there's a few other settings where I can configure the messages to send, how often I want to send them. And what I've actually done over here is I've got this this one here that sends messages. I think if I remember right, it's configured. I think it's like every hour or something. There you go. So every day, every hour, I send a little burst of messages just to do a test of the event hub. And that, so you can, with these automated tasks, you can do things like clean up activities. You can send test messages, and you can do a bunch of other bits as well. If we go to my service map, so in service map, I actually modified the diagram when I set this one up because I wanted to kind of articulate a slightly different view of the solution. So in here, I've got all the resources in, and I've kind of grouped these ones to say, really, these ones are what make up my solution. This sender logic app's really kind of a test thing outside of the core solution. So I can see what things work together. I can kind of articulate that. This event, the logic app sends to the event hub then goes to the function, and the function goes to storage and Cosmos. And you can see the Cosmos here is the bit that's flagging up as having the problem. So this kind of lets me zone in on that. I know my app's not working 100%, and I can see Cosmos as the issue here. And I can click on it, and it tells me which of the monitoring metrics aren't working. And you can see, actually, I think the issue's gone away because the count error of resetting Azure now that little burst of messages was finished, and it's back green again. So one of the things I can also do in the setup for that app, I've also got monitoring set up as a profile. So here you can see, here's the violations that I've had sent out. So every now and again, we get that burst of messages, which is deliberately thrown an error. And in my monitoring settings, so I've got to check every 5 minutes, and at the minute I'm just publishing out to an event to a Microsoft Teams channel. So here in Teams, you can see in my event hub channel here, you can see we got an alert just before about that issue with the Cosmos DB. But you can see I also get notifications for things like, there's my automated task just telling me some test messages got sent. And then I had an issue with the Cosmos earlier. And I think if we go back a little, I've got a daily status check notification. So this is just telling me, the function's good, the logic app's good, the function app that the function lives on is good. So you can have these status checks, you can get them, you can either turn them off, or you can have them every hour or whatever frequency. And I've chosen to get them in Teams, but you can get them on email, and there's a bunch of other notification channels available as well. Okay, so that's the event hub option there. And we can see, that lets me manage my event hub solution by grouping those few resources together. I've got a bunch of features that help me manage the resources in a nice, easy way. It doesn't necessarily have some of the features in Azure that would be things that would probably be too complicated for the support operator to use, and we just let the expert manage them in Azure. But those common tasks that your level 1, 2, or 3 support operator might need to do, if you want to let them do that in serverless 360, that's really the sweet spot we're trying to address here. So next up, we've got event grid domain. So event grid domain is, there's really two flavors of event grid. You've got event grid topics and event grid domains. And a domain lets you have a group of topics effectively inside a namespace, and you can have a topic that forwards a message to something. So in the example I've got, if ever you saw my one of my old demos from a while ago, I had this solution where I have truck notifications. So I've got a factory that sends trucks out, similar to the trains in a way, I guess. So the trucks send information about getting loaded, where they are on their travel to a customer, unloading the product and back. And I had in this demo, they all write into CRM, telling me about what the truck's doing. Now, one of the things you can do with CRM is you can configure things like a logic app can listen to a notification of something being updated in CRM. And I've got my logic app pushes that onto an event grid topic, and then I'm able to subscribe to these notifications. So one of the things that I've been doing is I've got two functions. They all really just are like test functions and test logic apps. They don't really do a lot, but the idea is that they would talk to an end system who was interested in that message. But one of the things I wanted to explore when I was doing this demo was the different types of triggers. So logic app has an event grid trigger, and you've got things like the durability of a logic app for replays and stuff. But there's some quite interesting things that I made blog about the difference between the event grid trigger for functions and the HTTP trigger, and that sort of gives you capability around dead lettering on event grid that effectively the event grid triggers has a few limitations on that you can do with the HTTP trigger. So it's just maybe one to be aware of if you're doing that kind of solution. But if we have a look in serverless 360, so my next demo is this one here, my event grid domain. And what I'm able to do, you can see here, I've got actually a folder with multiple business apps under it. So I've actually broken it down. And if we compare, I'll kind of put them side by side a little bit here, is I've got the sender and 3 different subscribers as little groups. So that really is like these parts of the solution, the sender here and the 3 subscribers on the right. And that makes it easier for me to support that, because rather than treating it as one massive solution, I've broken it down into sort of component parts so I can group the things more effectively for my support person. And if we take a look back at Azure here, so here, if anyone's not familiar with an event grid domain, so here's my event grid domain, and to be honest, the UI in Azure is not really the best. You've got a few features here, but there's not a lot of things you can do in the namespace really with an event grid domain. You click on the topics. So actually, if I had multiple topics here, you would see them all listed here. And the idea is it just gives you that container to group multiple topics. But my update message here, and you can see I've got my different topics. Actually, I think I'm in the wrong one here. Go back a minute. Sorry, slightly embarrassing there. I'm looking in the wrong resource group. I've got quite a few different demos. There we go. That's the one we want. So in my my namespace here, you can see I've got the Dataverse truck tracker events, and what I'm doing on the event grid domain here is I've got these 3 different listeners. So I've got the webhook one, which sends to a logic app, and really that just kind of sends it to an HTTP endpoint that the logic app listener would give you. And you can see if I go into the filters here, for example, this is where you can start configuring what messages you're interested in. And I think in this demo, I'm actually sending everybody everything. and I can configure things like dead letter in here and stuff like that. So, you know, I can point to a storage account and say anything that doesn't get delivered, send to that storage account. And so I've got one's for the logic app, one's configured as an out of the box function thing. So you can see that shows up as a function endpoint here, and you're able to kind of search for the function and stuff. And the other ones, if you notice, that's a function, but it uses the webhook trigger over HTTP, which I was kind of just talking about before. Back in the resource group, so the first thing is we've got this event receiver. And here what we're going to do is we start by listening. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong logic app again. It's the one here. So we've got the one that receives an event from CRM. So we use the Dataverse connector, and that's listening to my Dataverse instance. And if we take a quick look over here, you can see in my Dataverse, I've got my trucks table in my truck tracker app. And basically every time one of these trucks gets updated, there'd be a notification that that logic app's going to get, because it subscribes to that truck table. And all I'm doing is I'm actually just creating a message here, putting a few properties on the message, and I publish it to an event grid. And you notice here, if anybody's not tried an event grid domain, the only difference between publish to an event grid topic and an event grid domain topic is you have this extra field on the message which specifies the name of the topic. And that basically is going to send out to the event grid. You can see I've got a few messages here when things have been going through. And then my receivers, so the logic app receivers, really easy. We use the event grid listener, so you can see when an event grid resource event happens, and then I've just got a delay shape to simulate some work. And likewise, the function, if we open up the function app here, and we've got two functions. So one of them is the event grid binding in functions. So you can see that's quite easy. I get a message here, and I basically just have this function that tells me whether the system's down or not, and I either consume or throw an error. And likewise on the HTTP trigger, you can see the same thing over here. Okay, so you can see that it's a bit more detailed, this function, but what I'm actually doing here is it's kind of, I guess it's a bit of a way, the difference between an HTTP trigger and an event grid trigger is I have to do a little bit more work myself. So the event grid binding handles, you get a subscription event here that event grid sends you, so you have to handle that event as well as handling your own custom events. So you've got to do a bit more work. But as I said, I'll probably blog about this to explain the differences, because this lets me do a bit more things about dead lettering. But really, it's just two functions listening to the same event grid. Now, if we take a look at the supportability of this, so first off, I've got one resource group, but there's actually 3 or 4 solutions in here. We've got 3 different listeners, we've got the sender, and we've got a bunch of other things that your Azure expert cares about. But from a support perspective, you really want to kind of make that simpler for your support person. So here, I can, straight off, I can group by these little business apps. I can say, here's the resources that are the event grid sender. So I've got my logic app, my event grid domain topic here, this truck tracker one. You can see I've got some metrics for the event grid that I can see out the box about how it's performing when my messages are happening. Again, I can create my my service map, so I can show which resources work together. I can see they're all working and stuff. And I can also, one of the features we didn't look at in the event hub bit is the dashboard. So in addition to the dashboard, I've just shown you specific for the event grid. So this one before here, we looked at this dashboard, which is all about the event grid. One of the features that a lot of customers like is, I want to create a dashboard that looks at specific things from the 4 or 5 different resources I have. But this is like a single pane of glass for your app. So if I just maximize this out for a minute, what I've done here is I've said, look, if I want one screen view of how my app's going, I can create widgets on my own dashboard, and this one here pulls in how many Logic App runs have started in the last hour, I guess it would be. This is about the event grid messages. This is about the event grid topic and the run profile for the Logic App. And what I can kind of do here is if I go to the edit bit, I can just add my own widget, and you say what kind of widget do you want. So I want a line graph. I want it to use, so let's say we use the event grid topic, and then I might pick, which metrics do you want in it, which resource, and you basically can build your own widgets to get that single pane of glass on how your app's performing. Now, if we take a look over here in the function one in number 3, so we're looking good here. Our service map shows us we get a topic that's in the other app, pings messages to our subscription here. This function's working well, and that function sends messages to the destination system. And I also know about things like the function app, the app that the function lives within. I can monitor that as well if I want to. And I can, again, I think this one I didn't create a pane of glass, and I think it's the function 2 that has the pane of glass. So I can see about the processing here, and I can see about some of the messages that might have failed to be processed. But the one thing that I wanted to do in the service bus listener is with the event grid subscription, we also have this dead letter feature. So one of the things I've done with that HTTP listener is I deliberately make it throw errors at points in time. So I can actually go and, from the event grid subscription, I can see this dead letter list, and I can go and have a look at a message. So I can have a look at the data from it there and see what was going on. I've got options here to repair and resubmit. So I might go in there, choose to change that message in some way and resubmit it. And I can do things like I can bulk resubmit stuff as well. And so that's just a quick example here. If I resubmit, I can just say, which topic do you want to do it to? And then that just resubmits that message, and it'll get reprocessed again. And it's it's kind of an easy way to manage some of that dead lettering that you might have with as one of the common support problems for event grid solutions. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to jump onto the next demo now. So over here, we've drag the screen back a minute. So next we're going to take a look at service bus and event grid topics. So this is where we're going to combine the two together, and we're going to create a solution where what I want to do is things like event grids, they're going to send messages pretty much straight away to your listener. But in this case, I want to queue them up, and I want to do some more advanced things. So here we've got the scenario where I've got a factory or a plant. It has sensors in them. It sends messages from various sensors, and they end up going to an event grid topic. And we've got these various subscriptions. And one of the good things about the subscriptions is I can do things like choose based on subject or properties in the message who wants to get what message, which is really powerful. And I've got my test logic app that sends some test messages for our demo. But this time my end systems, I need to manage the load that they get to process the data. So what I want to do, instead of triggering a function or a logic app straight away, my event grid's going to drop it onto a queue, and then I'm going to process at a rate I'm comfortable with. And actually, I want to have some more advanced features about reliability, recoverability, and kind of managing problems and stuff. So this would be a common scenario if your sort of consumer end system had a lot more complexity in actually processing the message. This might be the type of thing you do. So if we have a look, so in the interest of time, I'm maybe going to skip the Azure bit because a lot of it's very similar to what we've just done. I guess the key thing here is on the topic. So this time I've got an event grid custom topic, which isn't in a domain. So there's a couple of subtle differences there. But one of the things I can do is, because I had two different topics going to one queue, you can see in the subscription here. So first off, I've configured a queue endpoint, so it'll automatically do the writing of the message to the queue for me. I don't need to do that. But in the filters, you can see I've got some slightly more advanced setup here. So I've chosen an advanced filter where the the data itself in the event, I'm looking for it to have number 5 in that code value, so I can do much more advanced filtering of who gets what message in the subscription here. Now, in serverless 360, we're now down at this demo here, this number 3 demo. So I've got my sender, and we can see that this is really simple. I've just got the event grid topic, and I've got my logic app here. Just to call out a couple of features on our logic app stuff. So you notice in a lot of our demos we're doing like the receiving and the sending with logic apps because they're easy to help demo some of the tests. But logic apps are really one of the real world consumers as well, and we have some features around like run history, and one of our cool features is action required. So if you want to have a list to manage a list of errors that you've had and you want to manage that you've dealt with them all, this is really where the action required feature can help you. And I can see here I can choose to resubmit it if I want to, and that should go away off my action required list when I'm done. And it just refresh that. I failed to resubmit it. I've never actually tried whether this is a connector that can take a resubmit, so I should have really probably tried the other one over here. But certain things like the HTTP connector you can do a resubmit for. So we'd have a look in our sender app. Again, we've got our event grid topic. We've got these nice metrics to help us see what's going on. I've got my monitoring dashboard here where I can configure what alerts I'm interested in. These are all the out-of-the-box configurations, but let's say I want to modify one of these to be 100 or lower it down. I can just update that and save it, and it'll tweak the alerts that I get, and I can add more counters. Again, I've got my pane of glass in my dashboard, so my single view about the logic app in the sender and the event grid. And then on my receivers as well, this time I've now got the queue here. So if we look at receiver 2, so we've looked at the event grid features before, but let's take a quick look at the service bus queue. So here, again, we've got our queue dashboard, so we can see we've got a little bit of data about what's recently been happening on that queue. I can see how many messages I've got in various states over here. And I've also got the option, if I had any dead letter messages, I can kind of go and query those, get them in, and I can do some resubmit actions, or I can purge the queue if I wanted. And actually, if you remember, that automated task I talked about earlier. So here I've got an automated task, and the reason there isn't actually any dead letter ones on there is I've got this automated task that's going to go and resubmit automatically any dead letter messages every couple of hours or every day or whatever I've configured it, and that'll just run in the background and send those messages for retry. And if I have like intermittent system problems, it'll just automatically make those retry if they're dead lettered. And then the last demo I want to talk about really quickly is this pattern that we implemented with one of our customers. So we've got this, the dead letter features are quite cool on Service Bus, and Serverless 360 gives me some good features to be able to manage that, automate some of it, and kind of manage my queues. But we had this scenario where a customer actually said, well, look, we need more rich features for doing dead letter management, because we want to be able to track, with the dead letter, and you can search by some of the message properties and stuff, but it's really difficult to like parse the message body, and especially when you've got like a big queue or something as well. So one of the things we did is we looked at, can we use the BAM feature in Serverless 360 to help us have this more advanced dead letter processes. So let's imagine we've got a scenario where I've got a website, and I'm going to simulate the data with my test order logic app, but my website sends messages to a queue to say, here's an order I want the customer to make. My order processor logic app tries to process the data into the end system, but if there's a problem, let's imagine it's a slightly misformed message, or it's got some data in it that's wrong, I can send it to the queue for retry, and with Service Bus, eventually I'll hit a dead letter threshold, and it'll go onto the dead letter queue. And what I can do is we created a dead letter process and logic app that basically reads the messages and just sends them to BAM, and we let the user in BAM look at the data, be able to search more richly based on things we've promoted out the message content, and then they can choose to reprocess. So if we have a quick look at that. So in the Azure portal, what I've done, I've got the service bus namespace here, and we'll focus on this dead letter processor. So it's a really simple logic app, and inside what I'm doing is I listen to a message on a queue, and then I've got my BAM transaction shape here, which sends it to serverless 360 BAM. And I'm just saying, look, here's a business process called advanced dead letter demo. There's a transaction. We only need one shape, but I'm going to archive the message, and that'll basically save that message in serverless 360 so the user can troubleshoot and do some stuff with it. And over in the serverless 360, I've got a business app set up to be able to manage the resources from the support operator perspective, and so I can see how that's going. But actually, the feature I really want to look at is over in if we go, go back to the home page here a minute. So we've got this, the business applications is this box on the left. We've also got BAM here, and BAM's really about monitoring your transactions as opposed to managing your resources. And I can go in here and say, right, we've got my demo service bus advanced dead letter messaging one. And what I'm able to do is I've got this transaction here, which just has one shape coming from a logic app. And what I'm able to do is if I configure some properties, you can see I've said, look, in the message you're going to get, there's going to be a customer ID, a message ID, an order ID. There's a path to where they'll be in the message body, so that when we trigger a BAM transaction, it'll actually try and pull this data out and give you it in a way that you can display the data and manage it. So if I go into the tracking feature, I can now go and have a look at the transactions that we've had, and I should have a few every day coming through, I think. So here you can see I've got a whole bunch of errors that came through in the last 24 hours. And what I can actually do is I can create it. I think I've got a saved search here. Or maybe I haven't. Okay, so let's put some columns in. So I should have customer ID, message ID, and I think it was error was the other one. So I can add some columns to my view here, and I can just save it. I can just make that the default view as well. So now I've got these extra properties showing, and I can see which customer each message was for. I can click on it and say, right, let's go and have a look at this particular message, and I can see there's actually a message saved here, so I can go and see more information about it. The error property, so this data invalid, this comes from the service bus message, and I can see the message body here. And I can basically have a look what the problem was, and I can go and, if I decide that one I'm going to resubmit, I can, I think if I remember right, I've got this configured. So yeah, we've got a resubmitting option here, so I can say, right, we're happy with this message, we're going to push it back to the service bus queue. I can modify some properties if I want, and I can just go, right, confirm the reprocess, and that'll drop that message back onto the queue. And we can see that message has been updated with a tag here to say it was reprocessed, and that'll go back through the system, and hopefully that'll be successful. And then I might go on to my next message, troubleshoot it, and I might say, all right, I can't really do anything about that. We fixed it a different way, so we'll choose to ignore that one. And we can give a reason why we've ignored it. And then that'll show up as being, yep, I've ignored that message. And you can basically just work through this like a to-do list of all the errors that you've got that you need to deal with. And the key thing is that while I could manage the dead letter queue, looking at the kind of Azure out of the box stuff, the problem is that because you're not looking at the message body, it's sometimes a bit more difficult to manage that. You're really just going through one message at a time. But if I need to come in and I'll get a request from a customer and I say, let's say I might go, was it 241100? I might go customer ID equals 21400. Actually, I've got my quotes wrong there. If I got that number wrong, I've probably got that number wrong. demo. So I might come in and go, can I search for that customer? And I can go and find their dead letter message. And I can search on a number of different properties and then reprocess and manage my messages, just in that slightly richer way of doing it. Now, in addition to the tracking here, I've got a favorites feature. So I might come in, find a message, mark it as a favorite, and I can kind of keep it there for dealing with later on. I can also do things like build dashboards. So you get an out of the box dashboard here, but I've got the option. See, I think I might have configured my own one here as well. So I've created a custom dashboard where I've created my own metrics. This is exactly like we did with a single pane of glass dashboards in business apps. I just go and modify them. I add my own widgets. And this time I'm just doing the widgets based on the BAM query rather than the query in the Azure Metrics API under the hood. So I can do some really rich dashboards. I can use things like I could search by filter by customer types or something like that. Might be a property that you might use in your query. And I can also configure monitoring as well. So if I don't know if I've got the monitoring configured actually for this, but I could say, here's a view that gives me some data. So I might say something like create a view that says, here's the errors in the last hour, or here's customers that meet this criteria based on these properties I'm filtering by. And I can trigger an alert based on data showing up in that query over a period of time. And I can also do things like send alerts on maybe on a per transaction basis. Every time there's a letter, I can send an alert to in this case, I'm sending it to Teams, but I could do an email or I could do one of the other channels. I think if I remember right, I can't remember which team it is that I've got that going to. Maybe I've got so many demos now. I can't remember which team it is now anyway, but I can show that another time, I guess, or it'll be in one of my older videos probably. But it's just going to whatever team that points to. And I think if we jump back to the slides now, hopefully I've covered that demo nicely there. The key one was really just that advanced dead letter management. So if we do a quick feature review, the things we've talked about are business applications. We can group the resources together, create this tree view of your different apps that you build in your Azure platform, put the resources together that work together to solve a business problem so you can manage them effectively without having to jump all over the place in Azure. You can create the monitoring, which gives you this sort of green traffic light sort of system so you can see where problems are. We've got the dashboard, which is a single pane of glass view where we can create our custom sort of view of different resources on one page, and we can have the metrics we care about for that app. So maybe you care about run success in one app but you don't in another or something like that. We then have a whole bunch of features around monitoring. So you can see here are a few images that I've pulled from some of the apps. We've got the alert history at the bottom showing when notifications have been sent. I can do a Teams channel notification if I want to have like errors going out to Teams versus email. I think there's some pager options and a few other things. We've got the ability to click on a resource and see, from the indicating that it's unhealthy, we can see what metrics are actually reporting errors and which ones are successful. So in the example on the top right there, we've got that the dead letter count's high, and we can tweak on when we do the profiles, we can actually take the out of the box profile as is, or we can tweak it for an individual resource to be different. Service map tells us a visual view of what our app looks like, how it's working, and helps us work out whereabouts we have problems and helps us zone in to fix the issue quicker. Business activity monitoring gives us the ability to put messages into a business activity monitoring platform where we can work out what the data is about. We can see an activity diagram of that business transaction and where we are within it. And we use that in this case for advanced dead letter management. And then coming back to our support diagram at the start. So really this is about how we provided the business activity monitoring and the business applications to let people who are not part of your expert development team and consultancy teams, but these are your sort of support operators, level 3, level 2, level 1, giving them safe access to be able to manage your solution And that really leads to the lower cost of ownership because everything doesn't escalate right to the top of the process. Quick recap on the features we've got. So business activity monitoring we've talked about, business applications we've talked about as well, but there's another feature that we didn't cover today, which is Azure Document there. This is about the generation of documentation to help you manage your solution. So we'll be able to go and point to an Azure, pull in all the resources, generate various things about them. There's some good cost analyst stuff in there as well, and we'll be doing other sessions in the future about that. And really, Serverless 360, it's intended to be, the core principles about a platform to help you support your solutions that you build with technologies on the Azure platform. A quick shout out for Jan's webinar. So that's later this month about designing software in Azure using serverless technologies. We've got some online resources. So we've got Serverless Notes is a good one. If you want to get some tips about implementing things like functions, logic apps and stuff. There's also Integration Playbook, which is worth checking out if you're into integration scenarios. We'd love to hear feedback on what people think on the product, what things they like, what they don't like, what features it needs to have added. And finally, Q&A, and hopefully we can get wrapped up just before 11 there, if that's good.
Wow, that's an amazing session, Mike. All those examples that you quoted, the real-time scenarios, it did help us understand how you can visualize business applications, spot failures in them, and fix them efficiently using Serverless 360.
Thanks, Ezel. I think maybe one thing is if we get any feedback from customers who would like to know more about our demos, we can maybe do some like slightly deeper dive content about how some of them are implemented and stuff, I guess maybe, or do some videos just breaking them down more individually. I know there's a lot to go through in an hour, and we really wanted to focus on, here's what serverless can do, but we can talk more about some of them, I guess.
That's correct, Mike. So just let us know if you would need a fully customized demo that would highlight the features that would fit into your business scenario. Our consultant team would be glad to have a one-to-one discussion with you.
Awesome. Do we have any questions, Ezel, or?
We do not have any as of now, Mike. Let's give a few more minutes for our participants to post any queries they have. Attendees, please feel free to post any questions that you have in relation with event-driven integrations.
I guess the other thing is we'd love to hear about the types of solutions people are building as well. So we think we've got a reasonable handle on the common problems people have, and that's really what we're trying to address, isn't it? And I think, but if people are having problems that they see, that's what our backlog's based on. It's driven by customer feedback. So, let us know what your real world problems are, and we may be able to add features to help that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Should we just wrap up?
One question.
Oh,
yeah,
perfect.
we've got one question, Mike. How do we handle event discovery here?
I guess the questions, what do you mean by event discovery? I guess maybe they're thinking about things like if you've got an event grid, how do you decide dynamically at runtime you want to subscribe to a given event, maybe, or something like that?
Yes, Das confirms that that's what he's looking for.
Yeah, so I think I guess there's two areas. From a serverless 360 perspective, I think that's maybe not quite in our scope of what we kind of focus on as much. I guess we're more focused around helping the support operator manage the solution. But from a design perspective, I think it's a really interesting topic. I guess there's a couple of features like and we've got things like schema registry and event hub and stuff, which can help you understand some of the things about messages that are there. But I think more for the event grid stuff, I'm not really sure that they've got a lot in that space. I think you need to know, but one of the things I guess that does help is the idea that in the event grid domain, you can have many topics. So it helps you separate out what messages go to what topics. And then if you've got some good governance around that, what your topics get used for, then you can have design time, event discovery, but runtime, I think, you can have things where things can dynamically add a subscription to an event. You can code that into your solution and you can configure that in. And you can also do that with things like your CI/CD. But I think you need to be aware of what messages you're interested in. Sometimes it's simpler where it's just give me everything, but sometimes it's more complicated and you want to filter. So there's a number of ways you can configure your subscription, but I think it's not really. I guess there's more work Azure could maybe do to add features to help people do that in some ways.
Yeah. Even Javier has got a generic question, Mike. Is it possible to create an email response based on form event that will notify the user, fill the form, and the admin?
I'm not sure if I quite understand the question, to be honest.
Yeah, I think he is looking for options in Azure services that can help him create an email based on a form event.
I think that sounds more like a Logic app or a Power Automate solution. So maybe like if you've got so you've got Microsoft Forms in the Office 365 world, you can fill a form in and trigger a Logic app or a Power Automate, and that can go and do some work that you need to do. So certainly in the serverless world, we can help manage, from a serverless 360 perspective, we can help manage that Logic app. And make sure if it's having any problems, we can help you manage it, report on it, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I guess the other option is if you think back to my, if I jump back through my slides a bit here, where are we? So this one. Depends what you want to use for your form technology. So one of the great things about Logic apps and Power Automate is they support a lot of different technologies, and so you've got things like Microsoft Forms. You've also got Cognitio Forms, where they can trigger automatically. But one of the things I think people do quite a bit as well is if you're using Power Apps or Dynamics and you build a richer form, you can then have your data written to the Dataverse, and that's exactly what I'm doing in this demo here. Is I've got a Logic app listening for events from the Dataverse. And then I can trigger and go and do something there. So I could, maybe if the great thing with Dynamics and Power Apps is you can write really rich forms that do a lot of logic in the forms and stuff like that. So then we can trigger the Logic app, and you can then go and email someone and tell them there's a form filled in or something like that. I think we actually used to do that for feedback, didn't we? Or customer feedback in Serverless 360. We had a Microsoft form that the team would fill in. I think it was your team used to fill it in, Azure, if I remember right. And if we had any suggestions or feedback, we'd fill the form in, and we had a Logic app would trigger, and it would go and create a DevOps work item so somebody could have a look over it, and we'd review whether it was something we needed to fix or if it was an idea for the backlog or just some general feedback and stuff. So there's lots you can do in that space. It really just depends how you're capturing the data and what you want to do with it. But I'd probably start with Logic apps being the thing I'd look to first to help you do a solution.
Yes, Javier confirms, yes, perfect, that looks good. Yeah, so we have come to the end of the Q&A part, Mike. Thanks for being patient and answering the questions, and thanks for the amazing session. Until we meet again.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you all later.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Covey.co